Hey, hello everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. So I had to get some emergency connection to the internet. So I have a new setup here. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay on this setup. Um, let's get rolling. I know there's some people still joining, but I want to make sure that we hit on some stuff to kind of get you ready for the exam. Okay, so I think there's a couple of things on the exam. I think I kind of mentioned it last time. Um, there's three sections to the course. One part of the course, which you just took with the first exam, was around HTML. Um, and, for the second part, which is probably the more challenging part for a lot of new people, for computers, is going to be around programming, right? And so that's really what the gist of the second exam is going to be about. It's going to cover a lot of essentially JavaScript programming aspects. There'll be true, false, there'll be multiple choice, there'll be some short answer. And short answer, by short answer, I kind of mean like, we can ask some questions, kind of say, here's some code, here's a variable, what's the value of that variable? Okay, something along those lines, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. And then at the end, there'll be a couple of like little word problems where you'll kind of read the word problem, and then you'll kind of write some code for that. And then, that will be it, right? And then the third part of this course covers Excel, really, right? There's a little bit of history kind of stuff. I mean, not really history, but kind of like book knowledge type of stuff. That you'll cover in the third part, which will get picked up in the final exam. Okay. And then I think on the exam one, I've been pushing the TAs to complete the grading for exam one. I think it's mostly there. I think we got a number of the exams ones completed. I'm going to have the exam one answers opened up on Friday to Monday. So if you have a chance, you can take a look at that. And so, hopefully that will give you something to refer to. It's not really going to help you for this exam. For exam two, it's more to prepare for the final exam. Okay. So again, I'm pushing to make sure the exam one does get completed on the grading so far. And, I think I mentioned this last time also, there's a number of people that, I think for the most part, most people did fairly well on the exam one. But you also kind of saw that some people kind of got impacted a little bit because they didn't submit their assignment one, right? And like I mentioned before, assignments actually count for a really significant part of the grade in this class. So even if you do well on your exams, but you don't turn on your assignments, you're gonna have a big problem for your grade. So do pay attention to submitting your assignments on a timely basis, okay? Like I said, if you have questions on your assignments, you should feel free to arrange office hours to talk to the TAs or to myself, and we'll help you, right? So that's one of those type of things that you're going to you should do well on, right? Because you have all kinds of resources available at your fingertips. You see examples on the internet. You can talk to the TAs. You can talk to myself. So hopefully the assignments, you should be able to do fairly well on the assignments. And that's usually why, a majority of the people, like I said at the beginning of class, about 90% of the people in this class get good grades coming out the end. You just have to put in some work. So, we're not really forcing you to do a whole bunch of memorization or whatever. The test is online. I mean, it's open book. You take notes. I encourage you to take notes and refer to those notes. So you should do well with this. So with that in mind, let me go over to here, and I'm going to just go through some stuff. Now, you remember this js.do. Now, there's an aspect of the JavaScript, which is basically like the GUI components. GUI meaning graphical user interface, right? So those were the text boxes, the radio buttons, just the regular buttons, those type of elements, which is essentially a mixture of your HTML and your JavaScript kind of coming together to kind of take some input, like you put those alerts, right, to pop up those boxes. or you put in those values in the text boxes to show some output. So that's one element of this, but then there's a good chunk of the JavaScript that will be on the exam that's really around essentially like just calculations or processing, right? So that's why you really want to understand how like different formulas or math works, which I'll show you again in a second, how those like the loops work, the conditionals. When I say conditionals, I mean the if conditionals. You want to understand how all those different types of things work. And if you can understand all those different things, then you pretty much have a good handle for what's going to be tested on the exam for exam 2. Okay. So, I guess there's a question here. Will the final exam only cover Excel? No, it's going to cover everything. It's going to be, the final exams cover 3 different parts, right? There'll be part 1, which matches to exam 1. There'll be part 2, which matches to exam 2. And then the final piece, which will cover Excel and essentially a number of topics around privacy and security for the final part of the course. So your final exam will cover all 3, but there's the second chance policy. That's why if you do well on the final exam for parts 1 or part 2, compared to exam 1 and exam 2, that score will be applied to your exam 1 or exam 2. That's what we mean by the second chance policy. So if you didn't do as well as you like on exam 1 or exam 2, if you do better on your final exam for those parts, that score will be applied. So that's what the second chance policy means. So but like I said, I think most of you did actually quite well on exam 1. So, that's looking pretty good. Okay. And, again, I've kind of commented a little bit about like, the academic integrity policy. It is treated pretty seriously. And as you can imagine, I can't really tell you all the different things that happens, but it's fairly easy for programs to scan your uploads, right? Whatever you uploaded to me, that's why we have you upload files, right? Those files can be matched, right? Or compared to each other's homework or to prior homeworks or to, whatever content's out on the web, right? So, those type of scans are happening. I'm telling you that's happening. Please don't break the academic integrity rules because like I said, it's a real pain for me to have to go through the paperwork to write everybody up on it. So please be careful with that. Okay, and there's no reason to put yourself at risk for a class that is giving you an open book exam and basing much of the score on your assignments that you can work through with help from the TAs or myself. Okay, so again, I have to make that point to you because every semester we get people that get caught up with it. And I'm telling you, we have software that scans this type of stuff. So don't do it. Okay. All right. Anyway, enough of me kind of going on about that because I still have to cover spreadsheets today. So let me go through some of the stuff on the JavaScript. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. Well, anyway, so when I go into js.do, it actually starts off with a number of different sample pieces of JavaScript code, which actually is pretty comprehensive. It actually pretty much covers a lot of the stuff that I need you to know for the exam. So let me walk through a couple of different things here, right? So here's the one part, document write. So this is almost like you're pretending you're writing your HTML, right? So you can see like, your tags here like this, right? And then you have your carriage return. So that's why you see this here. You have your variable declaration. Now, remember what I said last time, one aspect of the test is going to be looking at what are valid variables, right? So when I name a variable like 1, 2, 3, is that a valid variable? I hope everyone thinking no, right? That's not a valid variable, right? So you're going to have like some questions that kind of ask you what are valid variable declarations. Okay, so when I do this var variable, that's a variable declaration. Okay, now when I do this equal sign, that's an assignment. That's putting the value on that variable, right? In this case, we're saying hello, right? You can also call this line as the declaration and the initialization of that variable. Okay, all that means is that I created the variable and I set the value of that variable to be, in this case, hello. Okay, and then we have this one where we're saying, variable 2. All right. You might say that's not really a great name for a variable, but fine. Okay, so it's variable 2 and like that, right? World, right? And then also has the tag here for carriage return, okay? Or line breaks, I should say. So here, this is another variable creation, but then look here on the right side here with the assignment, you're actually doing a variable 1 plus variable 2. Now, you remember what I said last time, variable plus a variable where they're both strings means concatenation. That means you're putting the string 1 plus the string 2 together. You're concatenating them together, right? Which is why you end up with this hello world when I run this, okay? If I put them between two variables that are defined as numbers, then it's going to add them together, not concatenate them together, right? And if you mix them, if you put one is one is a string, one is a number, it's going to concatenate them, right? Because it doesn't make sense to add a string and a number mathematically, right? So it's going to concatenate them. Please understand that, right? That's another key point you want to try to remember here, this idea of concatenation. Okay, and of course, document write again. Here's the document write. Okay, so we continue on. Now we get to a part where we're kind of demonstrating some mathematical type of things, right? At the basic one that they start off with is n times n, right? In this case, they define n to be 9. Okay. Okay, I got like some questions coming in at me at the side here. Let me just answer a couple while I'm doing this here. So are strings space sensitive? Yes. So look at this here. You can see hello, and then you can see a space at the end of it, right? So that's why when I do the concatenation, it basically has the hello space world, right? So it does recognize spaces in there, okay? Now, when I go back to here, so this is n times 9 or n squared, okay? So n times 9, that's what that asterisk means, okay? And then here, I did a array, which is what we did for the last lecture, right? So we had like the this concept of me declaring really array, the way you name it is really the same convention as for variable. So, I might use camel case. Again, remember what camel case means. And then I do the assignment with the equal sign. And then I have new array. And then I have car1, car2, car3. Now, note this, that uppercase A, that's case sensitive. Like, so if I do this, this works. If I do this, that does not work, right? Let me run this. See, I have an issue here, right? So remember this, right? So if I run this, now it works. So array is case sensitive, right? So don't forget that. You might think that's a minor point, but either it works or it doesn't work, right? It's gonna not work if you don't use uppercase A, okay? So now here's the way I initialized it. I kind of initialized it right when I declared the array. And then I just referenced it, right? So in this case, I did this where I put in the string, right? Result of array, then I did a plus sign, and then I did test array 0. I don't know, let me change it. Let me make it 1, right? Remember, I'm starting off with 0, so it's 0, 1, 2. That's how many of these buckets there are, okay? 3 buckets, but starting with 0, okay? And then here's the carriage return, and I'm gonna write the result of n times 9, which is what we did up here. And let me just run that really quick. All right, and you can see here, look, car2, right, which is this element here, which I referenced with this 1 here, okay? Now, here's another thing that people kind of forget, right? We talked about mod, right? Mod is this percentage sign here, right? And what does mod mean? Sorry, I didn't create any polls for this, right? So I'm just going to put that out there. Have a think about it, and I'm going to run this now. So mod is going to return 0, right? I didn't change the text here. I should have just said result of mod, right? So I can do this, right? And then run it, okay? So mod means the remainder, okay? So I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this to be 4, okay? So this is essentially saying mod of 9 mod 4, 9 mod 4, right? Right, and then we get 1, right? And so why is that? Well, 4 goes into 9 a couple of times, right? 2 times 4 is 8, and then you have a remainder of 1, right? So that's why your mod is 1. Mod just means the remainder after you do the division, okay? Good. All right. So I covered this. I covered the mod, right? And just like you guys remember from high school math, right? Like PEMDAS, right? So if I did something more complicated, if I did something like with parentheses and then a plus 5 times 6, you remember the order of operations, right? First, you do the stuff that's within parentheses, then you do your multiplication, then you do your addition, right? Or subtraction, right? So let me run that. And then I got 31, okay? So because I did 5 times 6, right? So remember your order of operations, which is kind of something you probably remember from your high school math. You're gonna get stuff like that, right? So we'll give you like a long string. It'll be small numbers, don't worry, right? So there'll be whatever numbers, there'll be like some like math formula and say, okay, if you were to run this, like what would be the value, right? So that's another thing that we'll be looking at. All right, now what I did here, I did another array here. Now what I did was I combined it with a for loop here, right? Again, standard thing, right? I declare the variable I, right, equals to 0. And then I said I less than the length of the array. Okay, again, remember it starts at 0, the array. And then I plus plus, and then we did the sum total, and then we keep on adding each element of the array together, right? And then I can print that, right? So you can kind of see that when I do the sum total over here, 23, okay? So all that does is just kind of loop through this array and add all those things together, okay? So you remember I plus plus, in this case, you have the plus equals, right? So that's to kind of accumulate all the values. You're adding them and then storing them in the sum total, right? So this is the same thing as saying sum total equals the sum total plus each element of the array as I loop through it, okay? So we have another for loop. Notice a theme here. We're going to cover loops here in the exam, so make sure you understand these loops well, okay? What I did here, I kind of put in like a little bit of extra like Boolean, right? So these are your comparisons. Now, remember, I said a lot of times people mix up the double equals versus the equal, right? So when you do comparisons, you have the less than operator, you have the greater than operator, you have the double equals, you have the exclamation mark for not, right? And then you can do like and or, right? So this double ampersand is and then you have like the double long lines to make it an or, okay? And it's kind of similar when you were doing your web queries to kind of do like, tigers and baseball or something like that, right? You would have those ands that would work there also. So it's a kind of similar concept. This is a common thing to say this is an and. Now I said A equals to A here because that's always true, right? So it's kind of a trivial comparison. A is always going to equals to A, obviously, right? And then it writes these commas in between here, okay? So in this case, I just put it here just to kind of show you the and the equals for your Boolean comparison. I mean, for your comparison, I should say. And then, I is less than 10. And that's why you see all these commas here, right? But let me change this. Now this will never be true, right? And notice I put this in parentheses. It kind of makes it easier for us to read, okay? So the computer is going to value this regardless of whether we put the parentheses on here. I put the parentheses so it's easier for people to read this. Now, A is never going to equal to B. So what happens when I run this code? Then all of a sudden there's no commas here, right? There's no commas here because it never gets to this point to write a comma because this will never be true, right? So what happens when we say and means the left side and the right side are true. Since the right side is always false, this will never happen. Okay, so I hope you can recognize this example. And then we have here, this is a function, again, another important thing. And then we have like a button here. So this is the button to generate a random number. The only thing I did was I added a multiply by 10. Okay, so what happens when I do that? I'm going to have a button here. When I hit the button, it's going to call this function. And then it kind of comes up with all of this, right? Now I could do like a toFixed, right, to kind of chop off all of these numbers here. And remember, random generates a number between 0 and 1. And for you to kind of get to like, let's say 100 or whatever, you just multiply it, in this case, times 10, right? And then you remember we did the math.floor, right? So if I did a math.floor, and then I wrap this like that. And see if I can do this. Got two fixed, two, like this. Okay, and then I run this. So I got 1.0. Let's run it again. I got 9.0, 0. Okay, so when would I use something like this? This might be exactly the last class lecture I gave where we talked about arrays, right? So you remember for arrays, the first bucket starts with 0, right? So that's why I did the floor here. So math.floor. So then I get the range of 1 to 10, but I start off with the lowest number being 0, then the highest number being 9 because of the floor, right? The floor always brings the number down, okay? And you might say, well, why did I do the toFixed over here as part of display versus like maybe doing the toFixed up here as part of the calculation? Well, let's say I'm kind of using this function. I'm kind of having a whole bunch of different people looking at this function to do different things, right? Some people might want to actually see all of the decimal places, right? Or, in this case, I probably wouldn't put a 10 here. I just put a 10 in here for the demo. But, in this case, they might not want to be hard coded to always display like 0 to 10 or something like that, or 0 to 9 in this case. So you want the function to be able to do like whatever, like calculate the random number, but whether you want to display 2 places or 3 places or 4 places, you want to kind of leave that up to you. So that's why you don't do this until you do the display, right? So like you keep the calculation almost like in its raw form, and then depending on which people are using this, they can like round it, they can do whatever to it on their own. That gives them the most flexibility, right? So it's almost like you think about it, if some of you are taking pictures or whatever, like, do you want to give a picture that you've kind of done all kinds of effects on it and formatting, or do you want to give a picture more in its raw form so other people can play around with the picture themselves, right? So it's a similar type of thing when you look at these type of calculations. That's why I put the toFixed over here, right? And I should have probably put this as an input here to kind of say, oh, what's the range for your random number that you want it to be, okay? So anyway, the purpose of today's lecture really wasn't supposed to be covering all of this, but I figure I want to kind of give this to you because we haven't really spent a lot of time on JavaScript, but I want to kind of hammer home these points because they're definitely going to be on the exam. It's really a lot of what we're going to be testing. Okay, so really you want to understand event-driven programming, text boxes, radio buttons, regular buttons, right? You want to understand all the different things I just highlighted here. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a good starting point for you to develop the notes that you're going to refer to, practice a little bit, use this js.do, practice a couple of different types of math calculations and loops and arrays, and you should be fine for the exam. Okay, all right, so with that, I need to kind of get going with the spreadsheets because there's a lot to cover with the spreadsheets also. Okay, so let me close this. And as usual, I kind of put in here, what week are we at? We're at June 28th. So same thing, I put in like the lecture slides. Once I record this video, I'm going to upload it to YouTube. YouTube takes some time to make it high definition. If you want to see the high definition version sooner, you can go into not my media. Where's the media gallery? Media gallery. And when it comes up, where is it? So when media gallery comes up, in this case, I have CS170 summer. You'll see all the different lectures here. These should be stored as high def. So you can look at these. These probably are going to be available sooner than the YouTube version, which is what I put on the announcement. Okay. So yeah, let's get going. Let me come back to here. So I set up a little sample like spreadsheet to play around with here. I kind of zoomed it. I hope everybody can see it. Oops, that's not what I wanted. So let me flip this back. Where's my, oh, here we go. So zoom, you can set it to whatever number. So in this case, let me set this to 150%, like this, okay? And you'll notice what I kind of played around with up here. You have like, you make a mistake, you can do an undo here, okay? Or you can play it forward depending on how many things you've done here, right? You have this thing here, and if you notice, if you work with a lot of like Microsoft products, remember what we talked about at the beginning of class about having this consistent interface, okay? So a lot of what you see here, you'll see this on Microsoft Word also, right? You know, you want to do an insert, you want to do a copy and paste, you want to do a find, whatever. A lot of that type of behavior is the same across all of the Microsoft products. So that's what they mean about consistent interface, right? All right, so let's get to my PowerPoint and let's work our way through this, okay? So I'm going to try to go through this and then try to do the same thing on the spreadsheet or something like that so you can kind of see in action what's going on here, okay? Some of you may have already, you know, used like Excel spreadsheets as part of your daily life, right? You know, a lot of times you might be storing information like, you know, the hours you're working, right? Or, you know, you're doing some calculations, you're doing some math stuff, right? You just have a lot of data, right? Maybe you have some customers like for your own, you know, business that you're running. You might store information into the spreadsheet, okay, to keep track of things, okay? And there's all kinds of stuff with the spreadsheets now. You can do things to basically create it like audit trails. You can do your bookkeeping. Like there's all kinds of stuff. There's people that built all kinds of crazy stuff on spreadsheets. So these are the different topics that you're looking at in terms of like spreadsheets. Notice we have arithmetic operations again, right? So similar types of things here, right? You have common things like, okay, I'm going to sum all the numbers. I'm going to do an average of numbers. I'm going to find the maximum of those numbers. I can find the minimum of those numbers. I can find the mod, right? And I can do a power here, okay? There's these couple of things. I'll talk through each of them. I'm not going to just like rattle through them right now. And so you have charts. You can look at, you know, flipping things between rows and columns. So I'll get to that. I'm not going to talk about it just right now. Pivot tables is important, right? You want to kind of understand pivot tables versus like just regular tables. And then, you know, this just kind of just gives a general thing talk about why would you use Excel, okay? So very common doing things like inventory, you know, looking at financial information, operational statistics, schedules. You know, basically you can have like a whole bunch of data, right? It could be like whatever things, right? Books that you have, or, you know, people that you're employing, you know, your sales, you know, all of your purchases, whatever it is, like a lot of that type of information that goes into that, like all of the detail, You can store that information in Excel, and then there's all kinds of ways to slice and dice it in Excel, right? And we'll go through some of those things. Yeah, so spreadsheets don't have to have a single number to be useful, right? So this is kind of what I was saying. You can have your inventory on here, right? Or you can have your employees on here, right? So you can be doing things like, oh, where's the bulk of my employees sitting at? Per state, where is my employees at? Looking at your inventory, how much of your inventory is still waiting to be shipped? Is it like shipped yet? All that kind of stuff, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be looking at a number, right? It's just really for the typical person, like small business or at our level, spreadsheets are generally pretty good at storing those type of data, and for you to do some analysis on it. You can filter on it, you can search for things, and you can just organize it and slice it and dice it in different ways, right? At a corporate level, yeah, it might not scale too well. You might get into stuff like big data and stuff like that, where spreadsheets are just not going to scale to that level. And then you have tools that are kind of similar to spreadsheets, but just work at a big data scale. But that's not really within the scope of this class, so I won't discuss that too much more, okay? Let me see here. Okay, so here we go, introduction. All right, so initially spreadsheets, a lot of the usage for spreadsheets was around things like accounting, right? So financials, right? And in the old days, it would basically be kind of like this, right? Two-dimensional type of thing, right? So you would show, in this case, let's say you're talking about, you have a store, you have some shoes, you have some shirts and pants and whatnot. So you have your price on each item, how much of those items that you have here, then you get the total price, and then you're going to have like potentially a discount. And then, so what is that discounted price? And then you have your tax amount and your total due, okay? This is not maybe not necessarily the way you would actually store it, but this is more illustrative to kind of show, what you could do, okay? And so what I mean by that is, if I'm doing like the discount as 10%, do I really need to show the discount price if I'm kind of using this as like my database and storing it, right? You probably don't, right? You probably would only want to show your discount, okay? The reason being is because when you show the discount and then you show a discounted price and you store that in your quote unquote database, you create an opportunity for you to have like a reconciliation, like a break in your data, right? Let's say I screwed this up. Let's say, this was 10% and somehow I made this like to be $18.80, right? So your numbers are not correct and you're not sure which one is the right one. Is it the 10% or is it the discount price? So usually if you're really doing something like this, you wouldn't store it this way, but we kind of set this up so you can kind of see that you can do these calculations, where in this case, you're setting this to be equal to the discount of this $32, okay? And I can show you a quick example of that on a spreadsheet in a second. And then we have the tax amount and the total due, okay? And yeah, we can do stuff like there's some formatting stuff. You can do both. Common thing is you look at your numbers, you can set things to be dollars. You can do percents and whole numbers. So let me step into a spreadsheet here while we're at this point, okay? So we're here and I can say, I don't know, let's do shoes and shirt, and let me do quantity, UTY, and price, and discount, discounted price, okay? So as I'm talking, I'm going to kind of talk about a few different things here, and I'm going to try to keep this fairly simple, especially for people that have not touched an Excel spreadsheet before, right? So across here, across the top, these are your columns here. And then down here, these are your rows, right? On your left-hand side, these are your rows here, okay? Let's say, I want something to stand out. I want to make this bold. Well, actually, let me make it bigger first. So let me make it like 14. Then I can do a bold like this. Now I see here, look, I got like something cut off here. So I can resize the column. So I can do this, right? Or a nice thing that once you get used to doing this, you can do a double click. So I can go here and I can double click it and I can double click it, right? So that automatically resizes it, right? Here's another thing I can do. I can do this, and let's say they're all kind of whatever, something like this. And then I can do a multi-select. How would I do a multi-select? So I can do like a shift. As I hold it, I can hit my shift and I can do this. Right, let me click this off here. So I can do this and I can do a shift and click and I can do that. It highlights all of them. So what that allows me to do is I can do sort of like a group type of function, right? So I can do this and then I can go like that. And all of a sudden, all of them get resized in one shot, okay? This is just a demo. You can do stuff like that. And you can do a similar thing on this side, right? Let's say for whatever strange reason, I'm gonna do this here. Oops, keep on like clicking incorrect here. And then I can make it wider like that. And then all three of the rows did the same exact thing, okay? All right, so let's very quickly bang out some numbers here. 3, 4, 11, 50, 12, 45, and 15, 65. Okay, so we got quantity here, we got this here. I'm thinking I don't really like it all the way to the right there. So let me make it to the center like that. And maybe because I made this like a little bit bigger, I actually want it to be in the center going up and down too. So where am I here? Like that. I've got it like right in the center here, okay? Maybe I like that here too. Maybe I want to center this here, okay? And I'm thinking, you know what? This is a price. Let me center this too, like that. And then, this is a price over here. So why wouldn't I want to see it as a price? So maybe I'm going to do this and I'm going to go over to here and I'm going to make it like that. Okay. And by doing that, notice what happened here. When I initially put this in, I put it as 11.5. But of course, if I'm talking about money, I'm probably not going to say 11.5. I'm going to say $11.50. Okay. So you have stuff like that. Now, the discount. How would I do the discount? Okay. I'm going to put this in as 0.1 like this. And then 0.15 and 0.17, okay? But usually we don't look at a discount like this, right? Usually we look at a discount in percentage terms, right? So then I'm gonna hit this percentage thing here, and then I'm gonna show the percentage, right? So one thing that's a little bit tricky if you're not paying attention, you're thinking of this and say, oh, I'm thinking like 10%, right? But when you actually do the math on this, that's not what it is. It's actually taking whatever your number is times 0.1, right? Or 0.15 or 0.17 or whatever, right? So a big mistake that a lot of people do, if they're trying to do this in their head, they see, oh, 10, I multiply it by 10. You're not multiplying by 10, you're multiplying by 0.1, okay? Right, so what is the discounted price going to be, right? You might say, well, it's this times that. Well, that's not actually correct, but let's put that in there. I'm going to just show you how to do a formula here, right? So equals, right? That's the first thing you want to do. And then you want to do this, and then you want to do multiply and this, right? And there you go, right? So your discount is $1.15, but that's not your discounted price, right? So I'm going to come back up to here and I can see, well, here's the F2 times E2. So what is F2? Well, F2 is this thing right here, right? So the convention here is you take the column and then you take the row, and that's how come you get F2, right? So you have F2 here, right? And then you have multiply, which is the asterisk sign, and then you have E2, right? So E and then 2, and that's how you end up with this formula to get 115, okay? Now, I kind of screwed it up because I shouldn't have just said F2 times E2. That's only giving me the discount, not the discounted price. So what did I actually want? I actually wanted E2 minus the discount, just like so, okay? So this is what you want, right? Because I took 10% off of this 1150 price, okay? Now, here's the next thing that is most interesting about Excel, which is very important. So you might say, well, these are only 3 things I have in my inventory, and this is how I'm doing my calculation. That's fine, right? I can type these formulas, special formulas in one by one, okay? But what happens if I have thousands of these things? I have a whole bunch of like these different things here, hundreds, at least hundreds, right? You might say, well, I don't want to type this formula in, or even if I have to click on it to make the formula, that's like a real pain, right? Why would I do that, right? That's a pain, right? So there's a couple ways you can do this, right? So one, I can do a copy, right? So I can do a right mouse click and I can copy this, right? And then I can just click on one, or I can just drag it down and copy it to both here. And I can do a couple pasting options, right? I can paste like this, which will basically copy the formula down. I can just paste the values down, and it's nice here. You can see the preview of what it would look like, okay? You can just look at the formula, transpose, right? But basically, in this case, we want this one, okay? All right, so let's look at this. What happens when I did that copy? Well, the nice thing is it's smart enough to update this to be 3, right? So my initial formula was with 2, okay? When I came down to here, it said, actually, you want this, but you want to shift everything to row 3 to do your calculation. And likewise over here, same thing. It shifts it to be row 4, right? So that's one of the smart things about Excel. And it's like a real big labor saver to be able to do stuff like that. Now, I'm going to do a clear on this, clear contents. And there's another way I can do this. See this little thing at the bottom right-hand corner? I can do this and I can drag it down. I don't have to do any copy or paste. This kind of is what they call fill function. I can take this, I can drag it down, and it fills that in for me. Okay, and there's a number of other smart things that this fill function can try to figure out for you and fill in for you automatically. And I kind of, we'll see if I can hit that a little bit later. I'm kind of looking at our time. We're already at 6:45. So let's see if I can pick up the pace here a little bit. Okay, so anyway, I hit this stuff here, bold, and you have all these different number things you can do here. I think I missed the whole numbers bit here. So you can see like these decimal shifts here. So I can go like this, like that, and I can bring it back in, right? So that just says how many decimal places I can go to, or I want to go to, right? And then notice one other thing before I move on. This actually was smart enough to look at this and say, this is a dollar sign, because I had this as a dollar over here, right? So it made this into a currency automatically, okay? All right, let's get rolling here. All right, so I demonstrated how you do formatting. I demonstrated how you do cut, copy, paste. Well, I didn't actually demonstrate cut. So here's a cut, right? So I want to do that. I want to cut this. I can do that, right? That's one way to do a cut. I can do a Control X to cut it also, right? And I don't know. Let me say I do a Control V to paste it, right? I just pasted it. If I want to just empty it out, there's a thing called clear contents. A very important thing here. Some people might be tempted to kind of say, oh, I can empty this out by just putting a space in here like that. You don't want to do that really. you want to do the clear contents because, you know, when you're doing some sort of processing, space can be interpreted in a way that you don't want it to be interpreted. You actually want to treat it as empty with no value, not with a space. So sometimes that can screw you up. So it's better off that you just kind of empty it out instead of putting a space in there to clear it out. Okay. Clear cells, which is what I just did, right? You can delete rows and columns. So let's go back to here. So I can do this, I can do this, and then I can delete the whole column like that. Likewise, I can be here, I can do this, and I can delete this like so. Okay. All right. So formulas, I just did the formulas. So hopefully you saw what I did there with the formulas. So we have to copy and paste on the formulas. You have to fill, which is what I demonstrated. And we're noting how the formulas adjust to meet our needs as it goes down each row. Okay. All right. Do we want to show the formulas? We can do a control tilde, right? So I'm here. And on your keyboard, you can do a control, and where's my tilde at? It's up at the top, and control tilde. And I only had like the one formula at the end, which is here. So this is how you show your formulas, like so, okay? If I want to unset it, I hit control tilde again, and it brings it back to where it was before, okay? So that's useful when you have a whole bunch of formulas in your sheet. You hit the control tilde, you can see like, you know, whether like some of your formulas are kind of screwed up as opposed to like clicking on this one by one to look up your formulas. Okay, you might have had a typo, you might be referencing things wrong. You can see it right away if you convert everything to be your formulas, and then you can see right away if something's wrong. So let me do that again for you to see. So yeah, you can see all your formulas, and you know, something might jump out at you when you can see all the formulas like this. Okay.
Professor, what's a tilde?
Tilde is like that curly bracket thing. Let me put it on here so you can see. You see that? That's your tilde. It should be at the top left of your keyboard.
I see it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So let me see here. So I did the control tilde. All right. Absolute versus relative. This is an important concept here. So you can use kind of what they call I call it an anchor here, right? So the default is this, right? That means both the column and the row are relative. And what that means is when I copy and paste that formula, look at the copy and paste, you can see some of them have the $sign here and some of them don't, okay? So basically like what I did, I didn't put any $signs in mine, right? You can see my formula, it's just E2, F2, E2, right? So what that means is that when I copy and paste it, Excel will adjust my columns and rows accordingly, just like this, right? So that's considered your relative reference. Absolute reference means it locks it in, right? And so that's what this tax amount is, right? So this tax amount, it's looking it up in this I2, right? And it puts $1 in there because when I copy and paste this formula down, I'm not going to put like tax amount for every single row. I only need to do it once. So you're locking it in with this I2 here, right? So here with the $, in front of just the column, it locks it in and makes it absolute, what they're calling lock absolute. I call it an anchor, right? But you know, it makes sure this F value doesn't change as I copy it to wherever I copy it in the spreadsheet. If I put the $, in front of the 2, that means I'm locking it in on the row, okay? So the column itself, which is this F here, that's still relative. That means that will keep on moving, okay? Right, now if I put the $, in front of the F and the $, in front of the 2, that means both column and row are locked in. They're not moving anywhere, okay? And so in this case, with this tax amount, it looks like it has the tax in the cell I2, which they're not showing you in this grid here, but it locks it in. All right, so very quickly, let me try to demonstrate that here. Let me put in my own tax amount here. And by the way, you don't want to put a tax amount here, but just for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to do that, right? So 0.05 like that. Let me show it in percentage so you can see it as like 5% tax, like that. And then I'm going to say equals to this times this, okay? Standard, right? This is what I just did before, right? But now look what happens when I copy it down. Boom, boom, and nothing, right? And why is that? Because now for my tax, that became G8, right? It went down to here, right? And same thing here, I went down to G9. There's nothing there, right? And I'm not going to type in 5% all the way down. So what do I have to do? I have to put in this dollar here, like so, okay? And then I can take it down and we're all good, right? And I look here, you can see $G, $7, $G, $7. So when I copy and paste it, I've locked it in, okay? It's not going to move anywhere. So that's what we mean by absolute versus relative. And like I said, you should make a note that you don't have to lock both the column and the row. You can lock just one or the other. In this case, I'm locking the column, right? In this case, I'm locking the row, okay? And then this one, I'm locking both, okay? So this is an important concept. This is used a lot for Excel. And if you don't get this right, you'll get some unexpected results, okay? Because there's a lot of things in Excel. You're not just doing calculation for one row. You're probably calculating for a whole bunch of rows. So being able to copy formulas over and over again to other rows is hugely important for Excel. So this absolute versus relative cell reference is pretty important. Okay, so this is more talking about absolute versus relative. Yeah, some more discussion about that. Okay, so hopefully this quick demonstration I did kind of makes it clear what relative versus absolute cell reference means. Okay, so we got sorting here. And we have min max and more counting type of stuff. So let me do some of these things on here and then you can kind of get the idea of what these are about. And then we're going to go to the if statement in a little bit. Okay, so let me go back to my sheet. I'm going to clear this sucker out. I'm going to clear this out. Get back my normal grid here. So here's one way I can do this. Actually, I should put in the item here. Hold it. Boom. Yeah, maybe I'll make it like that. Okay. So now I can go here and, well, actually, there's a couple of different things here, but I'm just going to put a filter here, right? So you see what I did here? You can see data, and then you can see filter here, like that. And so here's some nice things here, right? One thing I can do is like, oh, well, I only want to see, I don't know, shirts. So I can click these off and I see that, right? And the nice thing is here, it recognizes this as your header. So it keeps this here, right? So it knows that it's only filtering all the items below that. So let me put that back in. I can go to here and let me sort from the lowest to the largest, right? And let me come back here so you can see shoes, shirt, pants, right? Lowest to largest, right? So actually, that wasn't good. Let me flip it the other way around. I'm going to do largest to smallest. All right, so hopefully you can see what just happened there, right? Not only did I sort these prices, but it actually sorted the whole row. So the whole row kind of shifted up and down because it wouldn't make any sense for me to move just the price, sorting it from high to low and then leave all these others where they were because it just totally would screw up your data, right? So by me sorting it, it treated the whole row here as a record and moved all of them. Right, so in this case, I sorted what's the most expensive item I have, and in this case, it's pants. Okay. Let me see here. There's other things here. No. Okay. Now, so what I got here is, let me turn this off here for a second. Now I can use some of like the Excel functions, okay? So for me to do Excel function, I can do something like this, right? I can do, you see what happened here? Like all of these crazy functions will pop up. If you look under the function formulas here, there's like a whole crap load of functions that you can get to, right? So in this case, I'm going to do sum like this. And it's very helpful. It's telling me, oh, well, you have sum, this is a formula, and then you can put some numbers in here and it's going to sum them up, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to sum this, and then I'm going to close paren, and boom, you got a sum here, okay? Let's say I want to go for maximum discount, right? So I can do equals max like this, and I can do that. And then I have the max here, right? Let's do the min, right? I can do min like this, boom, like so, and I have the min, okay? Let's see, what other type of things I can do? I can do median, right? So I can do this, right? I can double click it and then it kind of fills it in here, right? And then I can do that and I can close it off, okay? So like, what are the formulas out here? Well, I can just type in and it can start to try to show them, but I can actually go to the formulas tab. And you can see here, if you open up each of these, you'll just see it's just like a whole bunch of functions here, okay? It's like too much for me to kind of go through each one of these in the lecture, right? But you can kind of go through these and try them out. It's just like a huge amount of functions you can like play around with here, okay? But like I said, it's very useful that it does like sort of these hints for you, right? So like something like that, you can kind of, if you don't remember exactly the name of a function or you don't know what the parameters are, you can kind of do this, right? And kind of show you that, right? Let's say I do another one, which is a common one, PMT, right? So this is useful, right? So it tells you, okay, here's your input. I want to put in a rate, the number of periods, the present value, the future value, type, right? So it tells you all the different things that you need here, okay? So that's a quick thing for formulas here, okay? All right. So where am I back to here? Oh, so we're at if. Okay, so take a look at this, and that's essentially just another function, and I'll show that to you in a second. But this is a common thing that you would do, right? So if blah, 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 right? In this case, it's saying is H6 greater than 50, then show this value. Otherwise, show this, okay? So look at this. This is $30.82, right? So it's checking, is it greater than 50? If not, it's going to make it 5, right? So that's why this became $5, because this is only $30.82, okay? And by the same token, same thing here, right? This is $34. So that's why it's still showing $5 here. But this one is $77, right? 77.76 to be exact, right? And then it's greater than 50. So that's $10 shipping. So that's why it became this, right? So this formula that you see here is within their shipping column here. And it's doing an if, here's your conditional, right? And then if it's true, this is your value. If it's false, then it's this value, right? So that's how your if calculation works, okay? So on the question here about would this apply to any calculations, any number of calculations, yes, right? You know, some calculations, if you try to apply like, you know, to a string or some other symbols, it may not work, right? Because it's just not appropriate to do those type of calculations. But if you're using statistical functions on numbers, then yeah, it's going to apply to any of your calculations, okay? All right, now here's another set of cases you're using and or not, okay, right? And or not. So this is like a very common thing, like, you know, from when you were doing your web queries, your web searches, or when you were doing JavaScript, And now you're looking at this for Excel, right? So this is a case where you do multiple conditionals where you're checking, is this true? Is this true? Is this true, right? 1, 2, and 3, okay? If all three of these are and, right? You can see this as and. If all three of these are true, then you're gonna say not bad, right? If any one of these are false, then it's gonna be bad, okay? And in this case, this is the not, right? So if this evaluates to true, then this becomes false. If this evaluates to false, then this becomes true, okay? So if C8 is greater than 50, and then let's say that's true, right? So your number is bigger than 50, then you make it a not to be a false, okay? And likewise the other way around, okay? So it's just kind of like a flip. When you have a not, it just kind of flips it around. If it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. This is in line with the logic when you look at your web queries and in line with what you do with your JavaScripts, okay? So and or not within the if statement, okay? And notice the syntax, you have the and, you have the parentheses, like so. And you have like these functions. All this is doing is trying to draw an analogy between how functions are in Excel with what you're kind of used to in JavaScript, right? So you remember JavaScript, you have your function, and then you have your arguments here, right? Maybe you don't have any arguments depending on what it is, right? And then you remember you convert your Celsius to Fahrenheit, you know, where you have to pass in a temperature and it'll convert it, right? So in Excel, you remember the equal sign. You start off with the equal sign, then you have your function name, and similar type of thing. You might have some arguments, and you pass that in. Okay. So we just did the sum that I did in the sheet before. You have a round function, rounding to 2. Okay. Okay. So more functions and formulas. You know, I'm not going to kind of go through this. This is something that you would just kind of try out here. You know, just try any of these, right? And play around with it. You should get a feel for how functions work. But what I kind of showed you is kind of like the general concept with how functions work within Excel, okay? And so, you know, all of this here, you know, in some ways it's kind of like maybe just like a wizard that kind of just helps you a little bit here, but essentially saying the same thing, right? So you're putting in the formula and then putting in like the parameters or the arguments here, and it's doing the same thing here. It's just telling you, oh, here's what you need to put in, and then you kind of put it in like this, right? And it's almost like at the beginning you would probably use this, but once you get used to the formula, you would probably put it in the way I just did it, where you just put in the equal sign and then click on the cells and do whatever, right? So this is just kind of like a visual way to do the same thing, okay? Right, and like I said before, you do like the control tilde. You also have this button here, does the same thing. You can show formulas by hitting that button under the formulas tab here, or you can do the control tilde that I did before, okay? So more formulas here, they did the control tilde, or in this case, the show formulas, they click that button, and that's why you can see all the formulas here like this. All right, if function, right, what we just covered before, the logical test, the value of it's true, the value of it's false, right? So that translates to this test, the value of it's true and the value of it's false, okay? And here we did the control tilde to show the formula, and you can see it's the same thing going all the way down like this, with the relative cell references adjusting as you go down each row, okay? And notice here, we have the absolute cell reference here, right? So your E12, okay? Like this, right? So that's the 75 here, right? So E12, remember E and then 12, that's your absolute cell reference here. So what this is saying is that when I get to a certain inventory level, let's say in this case 75, that means it's time for me to do a reorder. So that's what this check is doing, right? either it orders it or it's okay, right? If it's whatever item here is less than this like inventory check level, it's going to tell me to do a reorder. That's what this sheet is doing. Okay. A wildcard. Wildcard is using asterisk sign. Okay. So let's say I have a whole bunch of similar types of things, right?
Professor, your audio is very low.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me okay?
It's a little better now, I guess.
Okay, sorry. I was afraid of this new setup here, but hopefully I'll try to speak up louder. Hopefully people can see this or hear this. So on the asterisk or the wild card, this would be like if I'm doing like some similar types of things, right? So if I'm looking for, let's say, different cities that have all similar name, right? They all start off with Washington, let's say, right? In the United States. So I can use like just WASH with a star sign because it will pick up like the rest of it, right? So it's just kind of doing a comparison with a wildcard in here, okay? So you can use this with file searches so you don't see the full name, right? You can just put in like partial, like if they all start off with, WASH or something like that, okay? So here's your wildcard function. Oh no, your Vlookup. We haven't gone to Vlookup yet, okay? Let me check here how much more we have to do. All right, so I did the series fill for you already. So we have charts and we have Vlookup and PMT. Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? Let me do like, it's 7:09 right now. Let's do a break until 7:11, and I'm gonna hit you with the Vlookup and the charts in a second, okay? So let's just take a quick break here. Hey, sorry about that. 2 minutes was maybe a little bit shorter than I needed. So I'm back. So is there going to be any extra credit today? So what I'm going to suggest for the online, um, you know, test or attendance today is for each of you just to kind of work up a spreadsheet, kind of like what I did here, and just do a couple of different things in terms of formatting with the numbers, with some functions here at the bottom, copying formulas down, right? If you're able to do all this, this really gives you the basics of being able to work with a spreadsheet, right? Some of the other stuff will become more advanced functions. So for your online extra credit today, just come up with a simple thing like this, nothing too big, right? Just like what I did here, come up with some inventory, do a couple of different things in terms of like formulas here, like this, and then just kind of show that you copied it down like this, you formatted some numbers, you formatted percentages, you do like you're formatting like this, you put stuff in the center like that, right? That really exercises a lot for Excel already. We're going to do a couple more things, but you don't have to do that for your extra credit. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. Vlookup. This is another very important function that we should get to know. Okay. So basically you would use a Vlookup. It's almost like you think of this as like a database, right? So you see this table here is like a database here, right? And it kind of looks it up. So let's kind of step through that. Okay. All right, so let's say I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say I have 1, then it's 0.05, and I'm going to say 2, I'm going to say 0.06, and 3, and 0.55, 4, and 0.67. Okay, and this will be something like rate, and this will be number. Okay, and I'm going to do something like this. So input, and I'm going to say equals Vlookup. Okay, so you look it up. You can read the description here, I hope, right? It looks for a value on the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value of that same row from the column that you specify, right? And then the column on that table has to be sorted in ascending order, right? In this case, I did, right? I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So, oops, I screwed that up. So E equals Vlookup, oops, like this, right? Nicely, it puts up the parentheses here, all right? So I'm going to look up here, right? So I'm going to look up like right there. And then I'm going to put a comma here. Like this, right? And then I'm going to put a comma here. And I'm going to say column index. I'm going to say 1, like so. Okay. Actually, so let me see. I'm going to put the input here actually, and then I'm going to blank this out. Equals Vlookup, and then that's what I'm going to be looking up. This is my array, and then it's going to be 1, 2, I'm going to leave it to be default like this. Oops. True, false, like this. And okay. Finally, I got this fixed. Okay, so what I did, I made a mistake. Instead of doing the lookup for the number here, I should have put it here. Okay, so by me specifying this FA, it tells me what am I looking for? I'm looking for 1, right? And then it goes into this table, which I defined, which is I8 colon J11. Okay, so that's this table. You see this? This is I8. This is J11, like so. And then I said false to make it look up exactly this. Okay, and I'll show you what it means by looking up for a range here. So let me do this. I'm going to say 2 now. You can see it returned 0.06. Then I'm going to say 3 here. It's 0.55. I'm going to say 4 here, and then returns 0.67. Let me just make this more clear, like that. Okay, and like that. Okay. So it's something like this. Now, what happens if I put in a 5, which is not in here? It breaks, right? Because that's what part of what doing an exact lookup does. You see this here, false? When I put false here, that means exact lookup. So if I don't find the value in here, like this, I put in a 5, it doesn't find it, that's it, right? But now let's say what happens if I change this and I make this true, right? So true means approximate match, right? So let me click on that. And it returns 0.67. So you see what it did here? It went to 5. It said, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it cut to the end here and says, oh, I don't see a 5 here. So I'm going to take 0.67. Okay, so that's the difference between looking at exact match versus approximate match. Okay, now let me extend this a little bit. Let me do 8 and 0.77 and let me see 10 and 0.88. Okay, and let me fix this VLOOKUP. So what am I looking for? I'm making this table to be J13 now. So I'm going to make this J13, right? You can see I8 to J13, that made the table to be this size now that I'm looking up against, like so. So now what happens, again, remember, I'm looking at this, making the range lookup to be approximate match. You see, approximate match like this. And you get 5, which goes back to 0.67. Let me go to 8 here. 8 becomes 0.77. Okay. And then I go to 9. And where's 9 at? And then 0.77, right? So I went to 8, it found 0.77. I went to 9, it doesn't find the 9 in here. So it went to the next highest value, which was 8. So that's 0.77. What happens if I go to 10? That's 0.88. And if I go 11, it still goes to 0.88. Okay. So what is the 2 before the false stands for? It's just like the option, right? So if I'm here, or you mean this 2, right? So this 2 is the column, right? So this is column 1, this is column 2. Now I'm searching by column 1, so it doesn't really make sense for me to kind of return this value because I already know what that value is. I'm passing in whatever number. In this case, I'm passing in 11. Okay, so I want the second column, right? I want the rate to return. So that's what that 2 is. Okay, so here again, true or false. When it's true, it means I'm looking for approximate match. If I'm false, I'm looking for exact match. Okay. And let me go back to approximate match again. You might say, well, what is a common usage for this, right? So let's say something like this. I'm gonna end up breaking this, but yeah, let me take these out for a second. I'm gonna take out this whole column here, this whole row here, and take that out. And I'm gonna say 5. 5, 0.10, 0.25. Okay, and I'm going to say discount. I'm going to say pizza, this, and this is only going to be going up to J10 now. Oh, it already adjusted because I deleted those rows. So it already made the table to be the right size. Okay, so I order 1 pizza, I'm going to get a 5% discount. Let me fix this here. So I do 1 pizza, I'm going to get a 5% discount. If I get 2 pizzas, I still get a 5% discount. When I get to 5 pizzas, then I'm going to get a 10% discount. So this is a common usage for looking at the VLOOKUP, where you're going to use the approximate match. So you're almost defining buckets, right? In this case, my bucket is 1 to 4 pizzas is 5%. 5 to 9 pizzas is 10%. And then anything above 10 pizzas, I'm going to get a 25% discount. So this is a way of defining like a range or a bucket to do your lookup on. That's what the whole point of using this approximate lookup is. Okay. All right. But so anyway, stepping back, the introduction to this, a VLOOKUP is a way for you to almost like have like this mini database, and you look up like a particular record within that database and return whatever value, right? In this case, let's say instead of pizza, well, with the pizza and discount, you might also have like, I don't know, I don't know. I'm not really being creative right now, but ABC, whatever that is, right? 4, 5, 6, right? And I want to get that, then I'm here and I'm going to say K10 like this. Did I put K there? K10 like so. And then I'm going to take column 3 like that. Okay, so I got that now. Okay, let me do 1 and I get 4, right? And notice this is the integer number 4. By putting percentage, I basically multiply by 100, right? Which is what you get when you do this discount, right? This is 0.05, you multiply by 100 to get it to like the 5 number, right? So in this case, I have a 4. That's why this became 400%, right? Because I left this as a formatting for percentage. Okay, so hopefully this gives you an idea about VLOOKUP. Very quickly, let me switch this back to false here to make an exact match. So exact match, like so. Okay, boom. Okay, and I do 2, doesn't find it, right? Because I'm looking for exact match. I do 5, then I have exact match and it finds something. Okay, so let me go back to here, and so we're on to charts. So I'm gonna charts here. So usually, so there's a couple of different types of charts. One category of charts is like these pie charts, right? Circles here. And the key point here is like, when you're looking at, usually you're thinking about things in terms of like a percentage out of 100, right? And then you're kind of slicing it up like a pie, right? So this is like a rule of thumb, right? And you don't always have to do a pie chart based on this, but generally you look at pie charts and you kind of do it as a percentage of whatever, right? So let's say, let me do this one inside of Excel, right? So protein, carbs, and fat, whatever numbers you want, okay? So let me see. So protein, carbs, fat, 2, 0.3, and 0.5. Guess that adds up to 1, right? Yeah, so that adds up to 1. And let's look at your charts here. What are your chart options here? So Excel has something here at the top. You can do recommended charts here, or you can say, I want to do the chart that I want to do. Okay, let's see what happens when I do recommended charts actually. So I'll do that. And it recommends that I do a pie chart. No surprise there, I guess, right? And it says pretty much exactly what we've been saying. This is the general rule of thumb, like why you would use a pie chart. And then you have a pie chart, okay? You can play around with it. There's different styles here, right? You can see style 2, style 3, right? You can play around with it, comes up with, you know, different numbers, shading, whatever, right? Whatever you like, okay? So that's a pie chart. The other way you could have done this, let me delete this. I go to here and I could do the insert and I can go directly to here. And let's say I want to try a 3D pie chart. Okay, so similar type of thing here. And again, maybe I want to see the fat, the protein and carbs, the labels, right? And the numbers, right? Maybe I want to do it this way. I want to do it that way. You can select any way you want, right? I kind of like that one, I guess. And then you can do different things here, right? So let's look at the elements here. Let's do a legend, right? So you want to kind of show your colors with the label. You can do this here, right? Or not, right? Whatever. So I guess some of these type of things, you kind of make a determination based on like how many elements are in there, right? You try not to have like a chart with a huge number of elements, right? So if I had like a chart, like a circle, a pie chart I'm trying to do, but I had like 100 different components, I'm probably still not going to put it into a chart like this because it's just so many of them. Like, you know, people are just not going to pay attention, right? Something like this, where you only show like 3 components as they make up this pie, makes more sense. Okay, so you want to try to think carefully. Same thing when we get into like some line charts or something like that. You know, you want to be careful with the ranges, right? If the ranges are very big in terms of differences, like they're all over the place, your charts are not going to come out to be meaningful. Okay, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay. So that's something to remember here. Okay, so I just did a circle chart. Let's do these columns here. All right. So here, I don't know, I'm just going to make these into some numbers here. 50. Insert. What do they recommend here? And they recommend a column chart, right? So let's go ahead and go do that, right? So you have something like this, right? So notice what I was saying, right? You can see these numbers like this. They're kind of like in the same ballpark or close. Well, what happens if I do something crazy here? Let's make this like 10,000. Okay. And then let me go ahead and do this. And well, what's it going to recommend? Well, it's going to do the same thing, right? It's going to do the column, but now look what's happened. I made this number so big that these numbers don't mean anything, relatively speaking, right? So this is kind of like a useless chart if you do it this way. So this is what I mean by pay attention to your range here, your number ranges, number of elements that you have. If you have something like this, where it's an extreme number, like you're not gonna have a good meaningful chart here. So you wanna pay attention to those type of things. And we come back to here, insert, I go to here again. Well, actually, let me do this. Same thing as like the pie chart. You can do stuff like this, right? Here, like that. Okay, we got a series here. If I want to do this, data labels here. Okay. Okay. I should come up with something better than that. So if I do this, and insert. So that comes out a little bit better, right? Because you have an idea of what are the things that you're measuring, like what units you have here. And so that's what you get when you put this at the top here. And then you can get that here. Okay. Let me see if I can get something else in here. What's another good thing I can put in here? I don't know. I'm just going to make up something here. Those numbers again, 15, 20, 5. All right, so now let's see what I get here and here, like that. Okay. So again, same type of thing. I have multiple elements here, right? So I put in like calories and carbs for each of these categories, protein, carbs, and fat, right? And then I kind of did it this way. Okay. And you can see the legend here, right? So you have the legend that I could click off and on. You can put the access title here. Put the data here, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's that. Let me come back to here. So more charts here, I did the series fill. Okay. Oh yeah, Pmt function. So I didn't do the Pmt function. So let's do the Pmt function here. Actually, before I do the Pmt function, let me talk it through. Okay, so the Pmt function is basically a very common thing, right? Let's say I'm borrowing money or I'm lending money, I'm making an investment. You kind of want to see how that breaks down. Let's say you're calculating your monthly payment or something like that, or you have like your interest. So there's different things that you can look at, right? So what you have here as part of this Pmt function, you have your rate, you have the number of periods, you have your present value, right? In this case, maybe you're talking about like, here's how much money I want to borrow, right? Then you potentially have your future value and your type, okay? So, let's go ahead and punch in some numbers here, okay? Here, let's say you have something saying you have like 10% as your interest rate. The number of periods, let's say, is 30, right? Which kind of is like a 5-year loan, right? 5 times, well, no, that's not 5-year loan. 30 periods by 12, right? Divided by 12, let's say. And then you have like 1,600 is the amount that you want to borrow, okay? And then you would put in this Pmt here. Okay, so let me punch this into Excel so you can kind of see that here. Oops. All right. So we have 30. Oops, we have 10 as your interest rate. So remember, I put in a 0.10, and then I'm gonna make it a percentage here. So that's your rate. This is your periods. I guess you're not going for the full length here, so it's like 2.5 years, and you have your principal of 16,000. 1, 2, 3. So that's your principal. And so let's look at this PMT. So equals PMT, right? That's my function that I want. So what's the first thing I want? Is I want the period. Then I put the comma. The number of periods is 30. Then I put the comma. And then what's the PV, which is the money that I'm borrowing, which is that. Okay. So it's telling me that I'm going to have 1,697 and 27 here. So that is telling me what is my monthly payment here. I'm trying to think, like, what happened here? Why is this showing this as 604 here? Okay. So what did I must have punched in something wrong here. T10. Oh, yeah, I see what happened. So I set the periods here is 30 periods, but the rate is an annual rate. Okay, so that's not correct, right? Because it's not, it's like apples to oranges, right? If I'm taking a rate as an annual rate and applying it to the calculation where the periods are in terms of months, it's not the same units, right? So actually, I need to divide this by 12 because there's 12 months, right? So if I'm going to take an annualized rate and make it a monthly, I have to set this to be 12 here. And that's why I was off by that much, right? So, and if you look at it, the number is way too big, right? Does it really make sense to pay that much money per month when you're only borrowing 16,000, right? So it wouldn't really make sense to borrow that much money if you're paying, if you pay that much money per month, if you're only borrowing 16,000. So yeah, that was my mistake here. So the rate here, and that's kind of an important thing there. So the rate here has to be in the same units as your period. So if for whatever reason I said the periods was in terms of years instead of months, but usually we're talking about monthly payments on things, right? Then you need to make it in sync. If I made this periods to be year, then 10% is correct, right? So let's say this period was 2.5, right? But in this case, it is monthly. So that's why I need to divide this by 12. And that's what I did here. So D10 divided by 12 here. Okay. So I hope that makes sense in terms of this PMT calculation. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. All right, cool. All right. So that got us through chapter 13 at least. So let me close this up here. And let me go to chapter 14 quickly. Okay. So here, so conditional formatting is this bit where it kind of extends what you were looking at in terms of your if statement here. So in this case, you know, they did this example where you have your lower speed limit, your upper speed limit, and then it has the cars going at various speeds here. Okay. And so what you would do is you would have these formulas, and you can't really see it here. So let me try to zoom in a bit. Oops, wrong thing. There. Okay, so I'm here and slide this over a bit. So what it's doing is saying that formatting the cells, if the cells are greater than, in this case, the speed limit, 65, then you're gonna make it this color, okay? So let me see if I can do that here. So speed limit, upper limit, so 45, 65, and car 1, car 2, oops, car 2, car 3, car 4, and 55, oops, 5, 67, 42, and 100. Okay, and so if I go over to conditional formatting here, so if it's greater than here, fill with red, okay? Let me see, I'm gonna click this off. Formatting greater than, where am I going? Greater than 65, like so. Okay. All right, so I hope everybody just saw what I did there. So I clicked on this and then I did conditional formatting. And if I said it's greater than this, it's going to make it red. Okay. And then car 2 is going at 67, car 4 is going at 100. And that's why it became red like this. Right. Now, if I go back to here, you can see the other different things you can do. Right. So that's why we have less than. So if you're going below the speed, the minimum speed limit, you can make it another color, whatever color you want. Right. You can also do, if it's between, let's say it's between 45 and 65, you can do something. Right. Where am I at here? You can also say, if there's like some values you're looking for, maybe you're looking for like a particular city or a particular state or something like that. So the text contains something, right? You can also make the search based on dates. You can look for dates, right? You can look for duplicates, right? And there's more rules here. Okay. So that's what conditional formatting is, right? So you have a range of stuff, which is like, I just selected this range here, and then you can do various different types of, criteria. And then you can, in this case, we're setting it to a color, right? I could have set it to something else, right? One of these different things here, or I can do a custom format here. Okay. So this is what they call conditional formatting. Okay. So let me zoom this back out. Okay, and so that covers this. So we have the what if scenario analysis. So there's like kind of like a goal seeker type of thing, right? And it's almost kind of like solve for the variable, right? Like an algebra type of thing here. Okay, so for example, you're sitting here, you have like these grades, right? On your paper 1, you got a 58. Paper 2, you got a 70. Your quiz 72. Your lab, you got a 60, right? And like your final grade is basically the average of all of these, right? So if I looked at this formula in here, your final grade would be probably an average, unless there's a weighted average or something like that, right? But it's an average, right? From this to this, right? But you didn't take your final exam yet, right? So for you to kind of figure out what that is, it'll kind of do this goal seeking thing. And it's basically trying to run through some numbers. Eventually it will figure out like what this value is. So it's actually not really doing algebra per se. It's actually just chucking in a whole bunch of numbers in there and then figuring out which number will make this work. Kind of like a Monte Carlo simulation, right? So it just throws the numbers in there until it figures out what's the right final exam number you need to get to a final grade of 65. Okay, so that's what this what if analysis does, right? And that's under your data here. So let me just click on this. And you can do your what if analysis. See this right here? Okay, and so you would set this up exactly what I'm showing here, right? And then hit the what if, okay? So if you want to, you can try that on your own, and you can run it through these different scenarios, right? It's basically helping you to fill in numbers, okay? So in this case, you're running some different scenarios, and it kind of say, okay, I'm going to say, what is my value for changing my scenarios, right? It just kind of does a shift on it, okay? So I did the filtering before. You remember at the the beginning part of this lecture, I hit data and I hit filter here. That's where these little filter thingies popped up, right? And then you can select on these different things, right? And if you want to unclick it, just hit that filter again, okay? The if function I did for you already. Okay. There's another thing is if it detects an error, you do this. I find that most people don't really do this if error function, but yeah, if you're kind of making your sheet more robust, you can do like something where you catch an error similar to, you remember the Vlookup? There were some cases if I did the exact match where I didn't find something, it would come back with an error like this NA, right? So you can do something like this. You can say if error, and then if I did my Vlookup, I came back with an NA, maybe it'll display, okay, I tried to find whatever value. I tried to find 3 and I couldn't find it in my Vlookup table, right? So it kind of helps you to kind of debug a little bit, right? So you might use this if error function. So we did, like the PMT function, right? This one is just, it's based on the same thing, but instead of saying like, what is your payment per month? It's looking at your number of periods. You can figure out how many periods. So you have like these different angles that you can look at to say, okay, if I put the investment in, what's my future value going to be? If I want to borrow money, at this interest rate, what's my payment going to be? How much is my principal going to be? How much is my interest going to be? It's almost like kind of generating like your amortization table, right? So it's just different angles on these things here, right? So this one, you can see PMT, you can see like P for principal, and then you can see I for interest, right? So those are your functions that you have here. Same thing here, right? That's an extension of it here, right? Principal portion of the payment, like I was saying before, interest portion of the payment, right? So that's all that mean, right? PMT overall, then you have like a breakdown of the principal versus the interest, okay? So subtotal is an interesting thing, right? So subtotal is one of those things where, let's say I did a filter on something. Go back to here. I gotta clear all this out. And so I'm gonna highlight this and see here. I'm gonna make this a table here. Okay, so in some ways, this is kind of similar to like the data, the filter that I did here, but it has a little bit more to it, right? So what I can do here on this table, see here, table, I'm gonna put this totals row here, okay? So you might say, oh, well, what is this all about, right? So you see this number here, this is 4427, right? Which is all of this here, right? And this plays a bit into this subtotal idea, and I'm just kind of showing you what that means. Now, let's say I did this shirt. I took out the shirt here. You see what happened here? This subtotal essentially came back as 3369, okay? So the 3369, it means it adjusted for this, right? If I did my sum, what happens, what's the problem with sum is, if I filter out some of these rows, I do this filter, the sum is actually going to take into account like all of the hidden rows, right? So it's going to sum up everything. So the fact that I hid this row, the subtotal is smart enough to adjust this number here. So that's one of the big differences that you see between subtotal and total. No, subtotal and sum, okay? So if you're thinking, what's the difference? That's the difference, okay? And you can do other things, but in this case, sum make the most sense, right? But all of these different things here, whether I'm using sum, min, or max, the key idea here to remember is that we're taking into account the filter, right? If you don't take into account the filter, which is what you get with the standard Excel functions, right? Actually, you know what? Let me do the sum here. So equals the sum. This is my standard Excel, right? This is a standard thing, and I do the sum here. Same thing, right? 4427. But now look what happens. If I go here and I take out the shirt, see, that's exactly what happens, right? If I look at this number looks right. If I look at this, I'm saying, where did that 4427 came from, right? Because I see this, and that's the difference. So that's like kind of the gotcha. So if you're looking at this and you plan on filtering data for, let's say, a report or whatever, this is what you want to use. You want to use the subtotal, right? If you use the sum, then it's not gonna look correct, right? Excel will look at it correct, but you just say, well, you know, your shirt exists already, it's just hidden, right? So if I look here, watch this, I can pull this out, it's still there. It's not like we deleted that row is still there, right? Now I pull this back here, right? Let me say I'm gonna do this. Like that, boom, right? See, this adjusted, the subtotal adjusted, the sum did not. The sum just basically pulls in the whole thing, okay? So that's an important point. So keep that in mind. That's one of the differences. And then what I just showed you here is the table, right? So unfortunately, I'm looking, we just ran out of time here. And the major thing I still didn't hit on is your pivot tables, okay? So I do need to do a pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a video to cover the pivot table, and I'll save it out there. I tried to cover as much as I could for chapters 13 and 14 on this, but it looks like I ran out of time here. So thank you for your time being patient with me. And, you know, I did use up the beginning part of this lecture to kind of review for exam 2. So that's kind of why I ran out of time here. But I think it's more important for you to be prepared for exam 2. So I'm going to have to record the pivot table lecture on the side. You can pick that up a little bit later. Okay. So thank you. Have a good night, and good luck for your exam. And feel free, drop in for the office hours. Just let me know if you want to drop by.